This past weekend, we were eating dinner at a friend's house, and we were discussing what is obviously the burning topic of this past couple weeks, which is the upcoming decision in the Dobbs case, which is likely to overturn the Roe v. Wade decision, meaning that it would be possibly the most significant Supreme Court decision of my lifetime, at least. And I made a comment at the time that I think that Justice John Roberts, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, is a coward. And the reason that I said that he was a coward is that you have five people who have signed on to the decision, and it's a decision that you sort of, as a justice, you make a commitment to really challenge some of the assumptions that are within the legal framework of our country, right? The Supreme Court decisions are obviously of very high gravity because all of the courts that are below the Supreme Court and all the courts that come after them have to decide cases while looking at past decisions in order to guide them in making their current decision. And up until now, the guiding cases with respect to abortion legislation and the rights of people in the United States of women to have or not have an abortion, the precedent that is used is both Roe v. Wade and, of course, Planned Parenthood versus Casey. So the first one was decided back in the early 70s, and the second one was decided, I believe, in 1991 or 1992. They're both very important cases, and many Democratic politicians have staked their careers on defending Roe and seeing to it that the woman's right to choose is secured by selecting judges that will abide by the precedent. Unfortunately for them, now they have a Supreme Court that's not favorable to the judicial opinion of Roe v. Wade. And we're going to read the decision a little bit. I should have put it up before starting the video, but we're going to read the opinion in part. I know I'm not expecting to. It's 98 pages, so we're not going to go through the whole thing. So here we go. Here's the initial draft. In Thomas Dobbs, State Health Officer of the Mississippi Department of Health, and Petitioners v. Jackson Women's Health Association. It says, Justice Alito delivered the opinion of the court. Abortion presents a profound moral issue on which Americans hold sharply conflicting views. Some believe fervently that a human person comes into being at conception and that abortion ends an innocent life. Others feel just as strongly that any regulation of abortion invades a woman's right to control her body and her own body and prevents women from achieving full equality. Still others in a third group think that abortion should be allowed under some but not all circumstances, and those within this group hold a variety of views about the particular restrictions that should be imposed. For the first 185 years after the adoption of the Constitution, each state was permitted to address this issue in accordance with the views of its citizens. Then in 1973, this court decided in Roe v. Wade 410 U.S. 113, even though the Constitution makes no mention of abortion, the court held that it confers a broad right to obtain one. It did not claim that American law or the common law had ever recognized such a right, and its survey of history ranged from the constitutionally irrelevant, such as its discussion of abortion in antiquity, to the plainly incorrect, such as its assertion that abortion was probably never a crime under the common law. After cataloging a wealth of other information having no bearing on the meaning of the Constitution, The opinion concluded with a numbered set of rules, much like those that might be found in a statute enacted by a legislature. So this is the big issue here, and this is why I think that the people who are protesting or doing worse than protesting in order to save Roe v. Wade are people who are illiterate in terms of the civic culture of the United States, the civic underpinnings of how our country came to be and what our Constitution means and how our legal system is built and how our government functions. Because, as Justice Alito wrote there, and I think Justice Alito is probably one of the justices that I understand the most about his attitude, because, look, I happen to agree with him a lot. Other justices I don't agree with as much, but and it's not as if I'm some sort of legal expert, but people know when they agree with someone and when they don't. And what he's saying here is that the Roe v. Wade decision basically was writing laws from the bench, which is not the function of the Supreme Court. So he continues, under this scheme, each trimester of pregnancy was regulated differently, but the most critical line was drawn at roughly the end of the second trimester, which at the time corresponded to the point at which a fetus was thought to achieve, quote, viability, i.e. the ability to survive outside the womb. Although the court acknowledged that states had a legitimate interest in protecting potential life, it found that this interest could not justify any restriction on pre-viability abortions. So Justice Alito was saying that the court at the time made a standard about whether an abortion should be legal based on fetal viability, and that they should not. He was saying that the court, the Berger court that made the ruling, was saying that prior to the second trimester or the end of the second trimester, a fetus is not viable. We now know today that that was incorrect. And therefore, the essential underpinning of that decision is wrong. So why are people continuing to cling to the Roe v. Wade opinion? Because they think that something that they got, regardless of whether it was correct or incorrect, they cannot give up. The woman's right to choose, they think, should be unrestricted. And they don't, to be honest with you, I think that the people defending Roe are being disingenuous because they don't feel that Roe goes far enough, because Roe did impose, in a manner of speaking, some limit on abortion to the end of the second trimester. Although the court acknowledged that the court did not explain the basis for this line, and even abortion supporters have found it hard to defend Roe's reasoning. One prominent constitutional scholar wrote that he would vote for a statute very much like the one the court ended up drafting if he were a legislator. But his assessment of Roe was memorable and brutal. Roe was not constitutional law at all, and gave almost no sense of an obligation to try to be. At the time of Roe, 30 states still prohibited abortion at all stages. In the years prior to that decision, about a third of the states had liberalized their laws, but Roe abruptly ended that political process. It imposed the same highly restrictive regime on the entire nation, and it effectively struck down the abortion laws of every state. As Justice Byron White aptly put in his dissent, the decision represented the exercise of raw judicial power, 410 U.S. at 222, and it sparked a national controversy that has embittered our political culture for a half century. And then he goes on to talk about Planned Parenthood of southeastern Pennsylvania versus Casey. This decision, if it is to be upheld, Justice Alito, I think, would be righting an historical wrong. And I think that the person who leaked this document is a person who is a moral absolutist. He's saying that it doesn't matter how much thought went into this opinion and the actual arguments behind it, and the fact that generally when the decision is being made by the court, um, you sort of allow the process to take place, because otherwise, if they were to leak all of these important decisions, think about what sort of ramifications that could have. If an important industry was to be involved in such a decision, such as the tobacco industry, for argument's sake, and there was a leaked opinion that would be unfavorable to them, and they would seek to sway the opinion of the court before it was officially adopted. Don't you think that this precedent, where a person leaks a decision, is sort of opening the door for that? And that's one of the reasons I think that people who are on the political left, people who are in um, the pro-choice side, they don't know what the hell they did with this. The Supreme Court, I get it that they don't have to. We shouldn't be just worshiping them and giving them all this reverence and everything. I despised it when there were conservatives who were basically kissing the ass of Justice Scalia, and I thought it was even more revolting how many liberals were basically elevating Ruth Bader Ginsburg to this cult of personality, that she was this amazing. Look, a lot of these people, they don't read any of these decisions. I don't really read these decisions myself that much, right? I'm a layman. I'm not a lawyer. And usually what I'll do is if there's a major decision that's handed out, I might skim it a little bit, as I just did. And there's only so much that I personally can invest in this, but you should be aware that even if you don't agree with the decision of the court, there are certain areas where if you interfere with the work of the court, you're actually leading to a very dangerous reality in America where, um, the order of this country, right? The order of doing things becomes interfered with. And some people might say, well, screw the order. Some things are more important. Justice is more important than order. Justice is more important than civility. And I get that. And the people who are objecting to overturning Roe v. Wade, I understand that you think that justice is being destroyed here. We have to understand something, that um, all of this overreach in order to defend a Supreme Court precedent is essentially admitting that all along you believe that the court itself should be writing the law. That's what's really troubling to me. That the people who support Roe v. Wade, the pro-choice lobby in the United States, Planned Parenthood and NARAL and all these other groups, Emily's List, they all the time they talk about how these decisions are handed down by these elderly or middle-aged white men who they don't care about women's rights, and they think that they should have the right to decide on how women behave and how their bodies are being governed and everything. The irony of that is that Roe v. Wade was decided by a court of 9 white men, people like Warren Burger, the Chief Justice of the time, Harry Blackmun, who was the justice who wrote Roe v. Wade, and ultimately, you would not have Roe v. Wade without a court of 9 white men. And the truth is that in order for Roe v. Wade to have any importance, you have to rely on this concept known as stare decisis, which is a Latin phrase that means to stand by things decided. Now, what this means is, and this is from Cornell Law School, usually whenever there's a legal concept I have no clue about and I want to sort of get a little better of an understanding of it, I go to this because it's just a very handy guide. Cornell University also happens to have a very good hotel management school, just so you know. Inside joke there. But It says here, when a court faces a legal argument, if a previous court has ruled on the same or a closely related issue, then the court will make their decision in alignment with the previous court's decision. The previous deciding court must have binding authority over the court. Otherwise, the previous decision is merely persuasive authority. In Kimball v. Marvel Enterprises, so it goes into an interesting precedent that was used in order to decide that. Now, there's horizontal stare decisis. That means that you abide by the decisions of the same court that you would serve on for previous cases. Or you have vertical stare decisis, which it means that if you're, let's say, at a circuit court level, you'll abide by a Supreme Court or usually the Supreme Court precedent, or if you're a district court, you'll abide by a decision by the circuit court. So that would be vertical stare decisis. It says here, although courts seldom overrule precedent, the U.S. Supreme Court in Seminole Tribe of Florida v. Florida explained that stare decisis is not an inexorable command. When prior decisions are unworkable or are badly reasoned, then the Supreme Court may not follow precedent, and this is particularly true in constitutional cases. For example, in deciding Brown v. Board of Education, the U.S. Supreme Court explicitly renounced Plessy v. Ferguson, thereby refusing to apply the doctrine of stare decisis. So that is one of the main gripes that you'll see pro-choice activists, Democratic politicians levy against the justices who are likely to join the majority opinion in this case, at least the way it looks right now, who are Kavanaugh, Thomas, Alito, Coney Barrett, and I think the fifth person is Gorsuch. So those are the five justices. And people are saying that they have no respect for stare decisis, meaning that they're saying that these justices do not have any respect for the prior rulings of the court. And therefore, they're ignoring a major element of how the court has worked, which is that there are many decisions that the Supreme Court makes over the years that after a while are decided to have been erroneous. Okay, and this is a huge table over here of decisions that turned out to be wrong. So one of them was the Korematsu decision, Korematsu v. United States, which was in 1944. That was a decision that basically allowed for the detention and internment of Japanese American civilians in the United States during World War II, and that was actually overruled in 2018 by the Supreme Court in the decision Trump v. Hawaii, ruling against Donald Trump. Now, there were zero Democratic politicians who at the time were yelling at the justices of the court they weren't telling them to abide by Korematsu v. United States, because everybody knows that was a decision that upheld a very arbitrary and unconstitutional detention of people based on national origin. So the whole concept of stare decisis, as people should be aware by this point, is negated if you have a decision that was erroneous or flagrantly unjust. Plessy v. Ferguson was flagrantly unjust because it was saying that segregation was constitutional so long as you had separate but equal accommodations for people of different races. And ultimately, it was proven in Brown v. Board of Education in, I think, what was it, 1954, where they said that, whatever Plessy v. Ferguson said, they're not getting separate but equal, they're getting separate but unequal. inevitably you have one side that gets a an advantage when there's segregation. You can't totally give equal accommodations when you don't have equal protection for two communities. And I don't think that there's any person who is a believer in the U.S. Constitution, at least, who would look at Plessy v. Ferguson today and say, yes, that's a constitutional way to run society. There are people who are supporters of segregation even to this day, and people who are on both the left and the right. But I don't think that they have a good constitutional argument to what they're saying. Another thing that I wanted to talk about before we close today is that you have really the potential for igniting serious civil conflict here. I don't know whether it's going to be a civil war. Maybe it'll be smaller than that. But you have a fire at a Wisconsin anti-abortion office that's been investigated as arsons. And here's the here's the graffiti that was scrawled on this building. It says, "If abortions aren't safe, then you aren't either." This is in Madison, Wisconsin. People who are from Wisconsin, I've never been there, but everybody knows Madison is one of the most progressive cities in the United States. Progressive politically, that's what I mean. They often have very, very deep blue voting patterns during elections. It says vandals struck an anti-abortion group office where a fire broke out and a Molotov cocktail was found, authorities said Sunday. So you have to remember that Wisconsin, for whatever reason, is ground zero for a lot of these very confrontational situations. That's where the whole Kenosha riots took place, and there was also similar rioting that took place in Milwaukee a couple years before during an incident that also involved police and at that time an armed suspect. There was the Waukesha terror attack. And of course you had the Kenosha riots and the Kyle Rittenhouse incident where he killed two members of this mob of rioters. And now we have this in Madison, which is certainly not the same type of city as Kenosha, but nevertheless, it's another step in the escalation of civil conflict here. And people are sitting back at home, and unfortunately, I don't think people are prepared for the ramifications of what's going on here. It's not only in Wisconsin. There was also vandalism against a church in Fort Collins, Colorado. This was a Catholic church. It says it was vandalized early Saturday morning. St. John the 23rd, which sits near the Colorado State University campus, had its front doors defaced. The left door was spray painted in red with abortion rights language. Windows on the right door were broken. It's still nasty and gross to see vandalism like this, said longtime parishioner Joe Erlinghouse, who was attending daily mass on Monday with his wife. So the Biden administration they issued a statement today. Let's see if we can get it. So this was from the New York Post. The White House has condemned the attack on the Wisconsin anti-abortion group. So the Biden administration quietly condemned an attack on the office of an anti-abortion group in Wisconsin Monday after the organization's headquarters were set on fire, vandalized, and graffitied over the weekend. President Biden strongly condemns this attack and political violence of any stripe. The president has made clear throughout his time in public life that Americans have the fundamental right to express themselves under the Constitution, whatever their point of view, an anonymous White House official told The Hill. But that expression must be peaceful and free of violence, vandalism, or attempts to intimidate, the person said. Fire was reported at the building that houses the Wisconsin Family Action Group in Wisconsin, in Madison, at around 6 a.m. Sunday. So there you go, the same story as before. The White House on Monday also denounced those protests against the justices of the Supreme Court. Here's a tweet. It says, POTUS strongly believes in the constitutional right to protest, but that should never include violence, threats, or vandalism. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki posted on Twitter. Justices perform an important function in our society, and they must be able to do their jobs without concern for their personal safety, she said. The Republican National Committee accused the White House of not taking a hard enough line against destructive protests. So I have to say here that I know it might sound partisan, and if that's the way it is, then so be it. But if this was the shoe on the other foot, if you were having attacks on abortion clinics, which there have been in the past, not in recent memory to my knowledge, but there have been in the past, and you had President Donald Trump in office, and he did not issue a specific and very loud condemnation of it, the press would have been completely at his throat. And in fact, I think even if he would have condemned it personally, in on video or at a news conference, they still would have accused him of fanning the flames and everything. But because it's Joe Biden, and because the press holds him to a standard that's so low that they will basically yawn about it and say that this is just fake outrage on the part of the right-wing media, I think that this is just another element of a double standard. Because look, we have a debate here that's very sensitive. We have people who believe in the sanctity of life on the one hand, the pro-life group, and okay, so that's this side, and then the people who believe in a woman's right to choose, the pro-choice side, and it's a very charged argument, and there's important considerations on each side. And at the same time, there are people who are fanatic pro-abortion activists who are committing acts of vandalism and, in some cases, arson. And the White House cannot issue anything stronger than a verbal condemnation on the part of the spokeswoman of the president. I think that's definitely a double standard. And the White House, I think, only begrudgingly did this because, for example, one of the places that was vandalized was a Catholic church. President Biden happens to be Catholic. And all the time they try to say that he's a devout Catholic and yada, yada, yada. And at the same time, you're having the people who are his supporters defacing Catholic churches, going to Catholic churches and disrupting services. On Mother's Day, by the way, it's disgusting. And the pro-choice movement, I think, is showing just how full of delinquents it is. And don't get me wrong, I think that there are people who have interesting and at least compelling pro-choice arguments that I might not agree with, but they seem to have, they introduce real conflicts that you can't ignore. But those disappear when you have people who go to an office and try to burn it down because they think that that's the way you can solve this issue. My personal view on abortion has usually been, since I've had any opinion on it, pro-life. I don't really remember ever looking at the issue and saying, yes, I think that people should be allowed to end a pregnancy at their own convenience because it doesn't work out according to their career goals or anything like that. I've always looked at this whole thing where they say, well, what about rape and incest and when the mother's life is in danger? Look, um, there are cases where the woman's life is in danger. There are cases of rape and incest, but those are outliers. Okay, and to treat the entire issue according to the rules of the outliers, it ignores reality. The vast majority of abortions are elective abortions. These are people who had, for whatever reason, become pregnant. These ladies have become pregnant, and they decide that, well, it doesn't work for me. I'm going to abort this pregnancy, and whatever the consequences, I'll live with it. And then in many cases, they end up regretting it because they realize that they could have, been a partner in somebody else's life, in somebody else's education, in somebody else's voyage to living and fulfilling their own dreams, and they decided to end it because of their own personal convenience. That's my view of abortion writ large. And then on the other hand, there's a different issue that I think people don't address, which is that in some cases the woman is encouraged to have an abortion by the man who got her pregnant. And I've met two guys who have admitted to me that they pressured their girlfriend at the time or their mistress to get an abortion because they were cheating on their wife, or because they were in a situation where they were fooling around in college and they weren't prepared to either take responsibility for the child or for the mother. So they pressured the woman to have an abortion, and she did. And that's why they think that the woman's right to choose is important. Not because of that, but because it got them out of some sort of responsibility that they didn't want to take. Upon themselves. It would have complicated their own lives. They would have had to have a divorce. They would have had to tell their parents that they were involved with somebody that they wouldn't have approved of. So that's my take on abortion, and that's my take on why the left is basically turning this issue into, this big, just sacrificing so much of our energy on something that they know they're basically tearing society apart in order to destroy people's lives, in order to end the lives of many people. Ultimately, I don't think that the abortion issue is the overriding subject of the public conversation right now. It's not the top priority. We're talking about a tanking economy. Today, the Dow and all the other major market indexes went down. I'm talking about Monday, May 9th. That's when I was filming this video. People are very worried about the economy. People are worried about their savings, worried about getting basic goods and fuel. We're seeing gas prices spike again when there was a very brief respite. So don't make any mistake. I don't think that abortion is going to decide the future of this country, but certainly, there's certain fault lines that if you play too recklessly, you're going to cause a major chain reaction here. That's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. There is a new newsletter article that is coming out this morning. So if you haven't signed up yet, please do. It is razorsharpnews.substack.com, and for all my other media, look at Odyssey, Rumble, BitChute, YouTube, Podbean, Gab, Minds, Telegram, and Getter. And once again, I do have a Substack. Have a great night. Bye-bye.